In the past week, some very controversial statements have arisen from LeBron's trainer about his diet. And you know I'm all about the truth in sports nutrition, so let's break that down in today's video. So I want to start this video off by just making it very clear. I cannot stand those videos that try to expose players' diets and speculate on what they're eating without having any actual knowledge around what's actually going on in their nutrition plan. But in the past week, a quote from LeBron's trainer has been circulating around social media. I found it on Twitter and people have been posting about it on Instagram, and it caused quite a bit of controversy in the sports nutrition field. So before we move any further, let me just pull up my phone and read this quote to you. It says from LeBron's trainer, "Right after a game, I try to go light with it. I don't give him a heavy whey protein because his body is in a recovery phase, right? And he needs to absorb everything that he can, everything clean like we just mentioned. So I try to give him a plant-based protein powder with almond milk or something like that with some fruits and just clean calories. Just give him clean calories because the first 30 minutes after activity, after a game, after a practice, etc., the body's like a sponge. It's going to absorb whatever you give it. So I just try to stay clean, stay away from animal products for the first hour after a high calorie competition." Now, looking at that quote, there's several things wrong there. So I'm gonna go through 5 major issues with that quote right there, and then at the end we'll look at the entirety of the information that we have about LeBron's diet and come to an actual conclusion on this subject. So the first issue we have is the idea of going quote unquote light with it. Now, that's not to say that you can't go light with it after activity. Post-workout nutrition is very individual. Some athletes really don't have an appetite, so it is necessary to go light with it. The issue here is the lack of communication about the context. And what do you expect? I think it's from an interview on some podcast or from GQ magazine. I forget where the exact quote is from, but there's not much context there. So if an athlete sees that and says, "Oh, well, LeBron's trainer says to go light with it after activity," they're gonna go run with that regardless of the context. Maybe LeBron's one of those athletes that doesn't like to have a heavy meal right after they're done training, and that's fine. But the issue here is kind of the generalization about every athlete should go light with it. And that's not necessarily true, because if possible, if you don't get nauseous or you don't have a lack of appetite and you actually are hungry after you train, by all means, eat after you train, especially protein and carbohydrates, because that's your body's prime recovery period. And that's one thing the trainer got right. After you train is a very important period for recovery in terms of refueling. And specifically with carbohydrates, your body's mechanisms for resynthesizing glycogen are upregulated after exercise. So it's a very key time, and if possible, you want to get food in, or you want to get a smoothie in, you want to get something in and not necessarily go light with it. Now, some people might because they get nauseous or can't stomach the food, but in general, we don't want to use that recommendation of going light with it because we want to take advantage of the upregulation of all those pathways that facilitate recovery and refueling. Now, the second issue is the idea of not giving him a quote unquote heavy whey protein shake because his body is in a recovery phase. One, that logic just doesn't really make any sense. And two, heavy whey protein doesn't exist. There's whey concentrate, there's whey isolate, there's whey hydrolysate. There's no such thing as heavy whey protein. And he says heavy as if it's a negative thing. And the research is pretty conclusive that whey protein is the most effective at stimulating muscle protein synthesis. So if possible, if you tolerate it and don't have any dairy allergies or anything of that nature, I would want to see you go with whey protein in that post-workout or post-game window to really help that recovery process. Now, again, it's very individualized here. So some athletes either are vegan or plant-based for ethical reasons. They don't tolerate whey protein very well. Like me personally, if I drink a whey protein shake, I'm not going to feel very good. It just doesn't sit well with me. So I do go with a plant-based option. But in general, to generalize that to all athletes should avoid whey and go with a plant-based option doesn't really make sense, because if you tolerate whey, it is more effective than plant-based sources. The third major issue here, and the funniest one out of all of them, is his absurd repetition of the word clean, just literally over and over again. Clean calories, clean this, clean that. The word clean or clean calories or clean foods really has no meaning whatsoever. Obviously, when people use the word clean, they're typically referring to whole unprocessed foods, and that's great. But if you're looking at the term clean calories, a calorie is a calorie. It's literally a unit of energy. You're not changing it. There's no way to make a calorie clean or not. And sure, most athletes most of the time should be focusing on whole unprocessed foods. But like I said in a previous video here on the channel, if you're focusing so heavy on going clean and really cleaning up your diet, it usually leads to an underconsumption of calories. And that's not always the case, but again, these whole unprocessed foods tend to be less calorie dense, higher in fiber, and a lot more difficult to eat in large amounts. And this might be very good in some cases. So if an athlete is trying to drop weight or struggling with cravings, it is good to quote unquote clean up the diet. But if an athlete needs to eat more, which is often the case with a basketball player, or in this case, LeBron after a game, he probably burned a ton of calories. So we gotta make sure he's eating a lot of food. In some cases, eating totally healthy or clean options might not be the best call. Again, very context dependent here. And just in general, be aware of people using buzzwords like clean and natural that really have no bearing on the actual nutritional quality of the food. So just be aware of that. And you see that a lot with supplement companies and people trying to sell you stuff. And we'll actually get to that issue in just a minute here. Now, another thing he said in this quote is pretty comical, is that they try to stay away from animal products because the body is like a sponge and absorbs everything. Now, there is some truth to the fact that your body is going to be more prone to absorb carbohydrates and utilize those nutrients after a workout. That is true, but correlating that with taking away animal products and avoiding animal products in that situation just really doesn't make any sense at all. Because again, like we talked about, whey protein and animal proteins in general tend to be more effective when it comes to stimulating muscle protein synthesis. So that might actually help recovery. And there's also just no rationale to limiting animal products post-workout. Like there literally is nothing in the research that would suggest that that is a good idea. If LeBron was an ethical vegan or a religious vegan, that's totally fine, his decision. But to make that really odd blanket statement of we avoid animal products just in the post-workout stage, not throughout the rest of the day, just really doesn't make any sense at all. Now, another really big issue here in terms of the whole idea of really pushing the plant-based protein powder and really emphasizing the need for that protein shake after LeBron finishes a game or training is the fact that his trainer is heavily involved in a new supplement company. It's called Ladder Sport. At first, I was under the impression that it was only a plant-based protein powder company, and I was like, oh, this makes sense. He's promoting plant-based protein powder because he's heavily involved in a plant-based protein powder company. You see this a lot. Like with the Game Changers documentary, the producer, director, someone really high up in that film was also involved in a pea protein company. So you gotta read between the lines here. Now, looking into it a little deeper, Ladder Sport does have a whey protein option as well, but still, the fact that he's pushing the protein shake and the plant-based protein after finishing training, and he's repeated this in multiple interviews as well, is kind of suspect. So just be aware of that, and in general, always read between the lines and look, is someone trying to sell you something? Because a lot of times, they'll make claims about certain products or certain ideas when it comes to nutrition in an attempt to push their product line. So the main issue here with this whole quote and interview is the poor communication of these nutritional ideas. You see this a lot, and I looked at a couple of other interviews in GQ magazine, Men's Health magazine, and the podcast interview that this quote's from, and a bunch of other videos speculating about LeBron's diet, and even some of the videos LeBron himself talking about his diet. The main issue that keeps coming up is the poor communication of these nutrition ideas. And some of the stuff they're doing with his diet and from other research outside of just this one quote, it doesn't look all bad. So I don't want this to be like an attack on his overall diet, because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And some of the stuff I found wasn't really all that bad. I think the main issue here is just the communication of it. And if they really emphasize context, like for example, with the whole plant-based versus whey, if the trainer were to say, or if LeBron were to say, yo, I just don't tolerate whey very well, it doesn't make me feel very good, so I choose to go with plant-based protein powder. Or, you know, after I finish training, I don't really feel like eating that much, so I get a protein shake in just to get something in, but then I get a full meal in an hour later or an hour and a half later. That would have been fine. But again, these people aren't trained in nutrition specifically, so we can't really expect them to communicate nutrition in the most effective way. So take whatever nutrition information or advice you hear from athletes or from trainers, because trainers are not nutritionists. Very important distinction there. Take whatever advice or things you hear on the internet with a grain of salt and think critically about it. So my question to you, and I want you to comment down below, is what do you think of this whole situation? What do you think of the quote? What do you think of the whole situation with LeBron's diet and all the speculation and stuff like that? Let me know in the comments below. Let me know what you think of my analysis of it. And if you want to learn how to put together a nutrition plan properly, I'd highly recommend checking out the entire series I did here on the YouTube channel, going over how to build a nutrition plan for muscle gain for basketball players. I'll do a fat loss one soon here, but if you want to check that out, I'll link that here on the screen right now. Drop a like on this video and subscribe for new videos every single Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday, and I'll see you in the next video.